Welcome back. Joining me on the political panel tonight is Liberal Senator James Paterson from Victoria, Labor MP Anne Arley from Perth, and Liberal MP or LNP member Scott Buchholz from Queensland. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
We'll get into the footy in a moment, but Scotty Buchholz, I would hazard a guess that you're the only one on the panel that actually cares about the result tonight.
I dug out my maroon shirt today so that I could show my patronage towards Queensland. True patriot, go the Queenslanders.
Well, we'll all be sort of default Queenslanders to kick it along for you tonight. I'm going to start with you, Scotty. You live in a regional seat. Your seat is, you know, a lot of horticulture. It's regional farming communities. This conversation I just had with Arno Nell, we know from Senate estimates the other day that 213 South Africans, predominantly from farming communities, have applied for visas to come to Australia in the usual way. Peter Dutton was thinking about, he certainly referenced whether or not they create a special category. We did this, if you'll recall, in the Abbott government in relation to the Syrians. Some would argue we should do this in relation to the South Africans, and of course in a regional community like your own, they'd settle in pretty quickly, they'd be prepared to live in country areas, and they would do the agricultural jobs that at the moment we've got backpackers doing. What do you think of it?
Well, can I firstly say that the South Africans that we do have living in my electorate and on the periphery up on the Darling Downs make an excellent contribution to our communities. You know, they've invested here, they've bought business, they are employing Australians and they're growing our economy. So they are amazing contributors to the economy. I believe that the white South Africans, with their intent to come here, that there are already provisions under the hardship, humanitarian provisions, and also under the current, depending on how much coin they've got, there are a number of other provisions that they can come here on. I welcome our white South Africans, along with other South African communities that have assimilated into our communities well, such as the Nigerians and the Somalians up in Toowoomba.
Okay, and just quickly, there's a big community in Perth. I met many of them over the years. They, as Scott says, they come here with money in their pocket. They sell up out of South Africa, but they open businesses in Australia and employ Australians. More is probably a good thing, I reckon.
Yeah, look, we do have a large South African population in Western Australia, and South Africans from all races and all backgrounds, not just white South African farmers, but all around. And they do make a very strong contribution to our society. I have a large proportion in the electorate of Cowan who continue to make a strong contribution and whose contribution is valued.
James Paterson, all this debate about Western civilisation, I know your history before entering the Parliament, you're a strong sort of advocate at the IPA. This has got to be beyond comprehension. The whole reason universities exist is for thought and debate, and the Western canon has enabled universities, indeed women in countries around the world do not go to university now, even in 2018, but for Western democracies treating men and women the same. This is just crazy. We can fund Islamic studies, Asian studies, Indigenous studies, but not the studies of the culture on which we're all based.
That's right, Peter. I mean, ANU's decision is absolutely mind-boggling. Let's remember there are 39 higher education institutions in this country, all generously funded with billions of dollars of taxpayers' money. And really, there's only one, Campion College, where you can get an appreciation and a study of Western heritage and culture. Frankly, you should be able to at every university, and it shouldn't take the funds of a private philanthropist like Paul Ramsey to make it happen. ANU should be offering these courses from the money that they already receive from taxpayers. So the fact that they would even turn down privately raised funds to offer this exceptional program is a deeply disturbing thing, and it doesn't say anything good about ANU at all.
And you're an academic, you're the one with the doctorate on the panel. I mean, universities used to be a place where you welcome debate, and now it looks like we're shutting out debate. We'd rather take money from Iran, if you can believe it, as opposed to an Australian who left $3 billion of his own money to make the country better.
Well, Peter, I'm not going to comment on ANU's decision because I simply don't know the reasons for that decision. But I would argue that universities are still places of robust debate and places of higher learning, I don't think we should be bringing into question the quality of our universities. We have a world-class university system here. We have people from all over the world coming here to study at Australian universities because our higher education system is such a high quality. Now, if ANU has taken a decision not to teach a particular course, then maybe we need to be looking at that course and whether or not there were things within that course that perhaps contravened their values or whatever it was. I don't know, so I can't make a decision on it or a comment on it.
Yeah, but hang on, the publicly available material in the papers today and yesterday and the weekend and last weekend said that ANU, and I went through this tonight, ANU had signed up to a draft agreement. They approached the Ramsay Centre to sign up to this money. They wanted to study Western civilisation, and the first little bit of gunshot from the unions, they went running. And they are one of the preeminent Sandstone 8. Why are we scared of the debate? I mean, you could go to many of these countries in the Middle East, you could go to countries in Eastern Europe where women have a hard time getting an education, and yet here we are in the Western civilisation, countries of the West, we educate women, we have no barrier other than what's between your ears to get into university, and we're going to throw this away. We're too scared to have the debate.
I'm going to just jump in here and correct you on women studying in the Middle East. In fact, in the Middle East, there are higher numbers of women at university than there are men. So women actually outperform men at university participation rates throughout the Middle East. And indeed, if you have a look at some of the engineering courses at some universities here in Australia, they have a higher proportion of women coming from the Middle East than they do from men in Australia studying in them. So, you know, I think that education opportunities for women in countries around the world isn't something that I would question. I think that there are enough statistics and there are enough research programs and projects out there showing that participation rates of women in the Middle East are actually very high at university level. It just doesn't translate into employment, but that's a different issue.
Well, of course, and they can't drive until the recent changes. They can't drive to university in many places in the Middle East. They have to be accompanied by often a young male. And of course, you know, in places in Afghanistan, it's on the fringes of the Middle East. I'll give it to you. It's not the Middle East. The statistics about young girls going to school have gone backwards at a rate of knots. And of course, you know, if you're a woman in the Middle East, you can have multiple other wives join your union, but you can't marry multiple men. So it's really not a lot of upside for women in the Middle East. Well, anyway, James Paterson, what do you think? I mean, surely the ANU gets government funding. All these universities get government funding. They've got to enter this debate.
Well, and they're certainly very comfortable in accepting funds from outside sources. As you mentioned, a lot of our major universities, ANU included, accept funds from foreign governments, including Iran, as you mentioned, for studies of Islamic civilization, as they accept money from Chinese companies for Confucius institutes around the country, which actually national security experts have raised some really serious concerns about the potential for foreign interference through those centres. And yet a centre which wants to study the great works of the Western literary canon, which wants to celebrate our British institutions and the unique freedoms and prosperity that has bestowed on our country, is apparently verboten at a major university. I mean, that is a deeply disturbing thing.
Well, we're going to take a break now. I've got questions from our viewers. There's a number of them. They're good. They're really good. I want to get into them after the break. Stay with us.
News Channel.
Amongst conflict, natural disasters and disease, we are there. From building crucial hospitals, delivering vaccinations, treating Ebola patients and performing surgery, you help us get there. As an independent organisation, Médecins Sans Frontières receives no government funding. We rely on you to get us there. You can help us continue to go where others don't by donating $20 now.
So I bumped into this guy and it turns out he's an electrician, but I lost the business card that he gave.
Did you try Googling his name?
And nothing came up.
Nothing.
No results. No website.
You sure he even exists?
I mean, I'm not sure about anything anymore. Maybe he's like...
a ghost?
just see the most insane goal
Celebrate this FIFA World Cup together with Kia. Get into the game.
Gopi has built her business with her own two hands. Each piece is completely unique, but they come to life in the same way. A messy, sloppy, dirty, splattery way. While she's not afraid to get messy in the studio, she's found a way to keep her receipts tidy, even when nothing else is.
Save time when you snap and sort your expenses with QuickBooks to help maximise your tax deductions. Smarter business tools for the world's hardest workers. QuickBooks, backing you. For a free trial, visit our website.
This ad contains over 15 mistakes.
Hey kids, looks like the old cubby house has just been turned into a magical princess dream castle. Go on. What are you waiting for? Play.
Nailed it. Search Specsavers Cubby House for your chance to win.
What would you like to pay for your room tonight? $150, $120, or $99. It's the same room with the same service, just different prices. It's really up to you. Well, nobody ever asks you this at the hotel reception, do they? But this is exactly what Trivago does for you. Trivago often shows you the price if you book directly with the hotel, as well as prices from more than 200 different websites. Trivago just compares. The choice is up to you. Hotel Trivago.
Look how I work it. They wanna know why. Love what I do, don't need no gimmick. No play when I play, I go all in.
My days are crazy busy. And sometimes it can leave my skin looking tired. Luckily I have Olay Total Effects. Just like me, it does many things at once to keep my skin looking fresh and radiant. Olay.
Right now, Toyota Material Handling means business. Because for a limited time, when you order any selected Toyota 8FBN battery electric forklift, you'll score a great forklift deal and a $1,000 Caltex Star Cash card.
Sit inside. That's the way it's gonna be,
Little darling, we'll be riding on the horses, yeah.
I get it, mate, but it's not the most epic pub act. What about Run to Paradise?
Han, now you're talking.
Welcome back. Still with me on the panel is James Paterson, Anne Arley and Scott Buchholz. Scotty Buchholz, I'm going to go to you first. I've got a question from Christiana in New South Wales. It relates to something that's happened today. There's been a combined welfare blitz in New South Wales. I'll pop the question up on the screen for viewers. Today there was a welfare combined agency blitz in St Mary's and Mount Druitt, that's in Western Sydney. Overpaid by mistake or by design, welfare recipients will still be required to pay back the money and will possibly be prosecuted. Her question is, why are MPs who by mistake or by design have been found ineligible to sit in Parliament, why are they not required to repay the money illegally given to them by taxpayers? The principle is exactly the same, she says.
Well, not being one of those politicians in question, Christy, from New South Wales, I don't know if the two are the same. If you've been paid twice, which is the argument that you just put to me, and you're having to pay back one part of that, is totally separate to have acted in good faith, found by the High Court not to have been eligible to sit in the Parliament. You have, in good faith, whether or not it was someone from the Labor Party or from Xenophon or from our party, they've conducted the work. They've done the work. I wouldn't be pursuant of someone who's done the work. If I wanted to sack one of my drivers for overpaying, I'm not going to ask for their wages back for the year.
Anne, do you think they should pay it back?
I'm with Scotty on this one, actually. You know, I think he's absolutely right. I think they are two separate issues. And people who have done the work and in good faith and for whatever reason have found to be ineligible to sit, it doesn't mean that they haven't done the work. You can't go back and take back the work. They've done the work.
Yeah, but I think, James Paterson, the point that Christiana is trying to make is that, you know, by mistake, in this case with the Centrelink people, or by design, they've been given money they weren't entitled to. Well, by mistake or by design, the High Court has ruled that these members of Parliament had no right to be in their places. They were not duly elected under law. That's by mistake or by design, isn't it?
Well, I certainly understand where she's coming from, and I'd feel pretty angry too if I was a taxpayer and my local MP was forcing me back to the polls because they hadn't done the necessary paperwork that they should have done or hadn't done the necessary checks that they should have done. I would draw a distinction between those MPs who were genuinely unaware and was brought to their attention and subsequently resigned, and those who should have known, at least from the Canavan decision onwards, that they were not eligible to serve in Parliament. And as we know, 5 of them continued to do so in a number of seats, and we're now facing by-elections that should have happened a long time ago, so that the money that they earned and the expenses that they accrued in between the Canavan decision late last year and these 5 by-elections that are happening now, I think that's actually a different category, and there is a case that we should look at that differently.
All right, next question relates to tax. There's been a lot of debate, obviously, about the tax package, and it will now be voted on by the Parliament, so says the government, in the next week. Going into the by-election, a decision then will be known where Labor stands. That we don't know yet whether they'll support all 3 tranches of the government's package. But Jan from Yeppoon has this question. What about making voting available to working people and those who have been former taxpayers only? What do you reckon about that, James Paterson?
Well, I mean, as much as I sympathise with the sentiment, we all are Australians and we have an equal right to have a say in our political process, whether we are currently paying tax, not paying tax, or have never paid tax. I mean, the reason why we give people the vote in this country is not because of their contribution to society, but because they are an individual human being with equal worth and have equal say in the future of our country. So I wouldn't support taking the right to vote away from people who are not currently taxpayers.
Scott Buchholz, is this going to be a coalition of the Queenslanders here? You're going to support Jan's point?
Jan lives in a beautiful part of Queensland, up there in sunny Yeppoon, gateway to the Great Keppels. I used to be an advocate for Jan's position, you know, that for non-compulsory voting here in Australia, until I went to America, and I was fortunate enough to go over there and work on John McCain's campaign, and saw firsthand the welfare, the lack of welfare that exists, and an underclass that exists in the Americas. And they don't have a voice. They don't have a voice. And it was only when I actually went there, saw it firsthand, that I changed my position that the welfare mentality here in Australia, their voice is equal and has the similar vote to someone who's got millions. I think it's a much more democratic process, Peter.
Yeah, well, I differ with you on one point. I don't think we have compulsory voting in Australia. We have compulsory attendance. But you can donkey, you can put a blank form in, you can do whatever you like.
Sure.
And Ali,
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Oh, look, I think what Scott just said was an incredibly interesting and insightful response there about the difference between compulsory voting and the non-compulsory voting system that they have in the US. I agree with both Scott and James that citizenship and the right to vote should be open to all people. I think it's important to remember that people go on to welfare for all sorts of reasons, and a lot of the time there are a minority who might be rorting the system, if you like, but most of the time people are there through no fault of their own and through circumstance. I don't see that they should be punished by not being given the full rights of citizenship, which includes the right to vote.
Senator Paterson, you're in the hot seat on this one. It's a Senate-related question from Maiko in WA. It's a really good question. There's some additional notes to it, but I'll get to the point. You know, you look at the way in which Paul Kelly wrote about it today. There's been 14-odd changes of senators, from independents to minor parties, swapping from this one to that one, joining a team because they're all now faced with the reality that if they are elected without a party banner at the last election and then went independent, they're unlikely to get up at the next election. So, you know, it's a bit like the music stopped and they're all trying to find a chair. Is the Senate democratic? Is the Senate democratic? Should it have a process like the Lords where it gets 2 goes at rejecting legislation but then otherwise has to adopt it? Should someone with less than 200 personal votes be allowed to take a seat in the parliament? And particularly this one, if you are elected under a party and you sit in the Senate and are sworn in under that party, should you be allowed to change it at whim and become an independent?
Well, there's a lot in that, Peter, and as you say, today is probably not the best day to be defending the Senate. Some minor parties in the Senate and some independent senators have not exactly been covering themselves or the institution in glory, but I'm absolutely a defender of the Senate as an institution, as a very important check on the power of governments. If you go back to the debates at Federation, our founding fathers explicitly considered, should we go down the British path and have a weaker upper house in the style of the House of Lords, or should we go down the American path and have a strong upper house? And they deliberately chose a strong upper house because they wanted a check and balance on the power of governments. Now, there certainly are people who propose from time to time watering down the powers of the Senate, and in a sense that would make it easier for a good government to do good things. But at the same time, it would also make it easier for a bad government to do bad things. And given that we would all disagree on what constitutes a good government, what constitutes a bad government, every day of the week, I would choose a limited government with checks on their power rather than an untrammelled, unlimited power.
Well, I agree in part with you, James, but I have to say I worked 10 years in the Senate, only for senators during the Howard years, a decade, and I don't think the current Senate is covering itself in glory.
No argument there.
Thank you very much for your time tonight, panel. James Paterson from Victoria, and Ali from the West, and Scotty Buchholz from Queensland. Go the Maroons, hey?
Nice.
Well, we'll see. I don't think I'll be watching because I'll be more interested in being on Paul Murray and talking to you. I'll be there at 9 o'clock, but don't go anywhere now. You've got the Bolt Report up next.